Hello. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Now I can see on the screen Manasa, good morning, and Harinath, good morning. Hello. Yeah. Now we'll be discussing today in the about
Good morning, sir.
yeah, good morning, Harinath. Good morning, Harinath Garu, and we have even Manasa also on the screen. I can see. Um, yeah. Okay. Now we'll begin the class on migration. Okay, on the topic called migration. This is your 10th unit in your course. We'll be discussing about migration today. As you all know that migration is the most important demographic variable that influence population distribution in any society, right? The population changes generally occur either if people migrate from their place or different people come to their place. It occurs changes in the population distribution, whether it causes the more population or it causes to less number of population, right? So in early history that most movements of people were group movements and in search of areas where food was abundant, right? The invention of agriculture and the birth of civilization resulted in new innovations, in search of their livelihood, in search of their security, in search of new job opportunities, and so on and so forth. So the people of the movements of people led to a lot of cultural dispersion, also the cultural innovation, cultural changes in any given society. So, and particularly the movement of this migration has got tremendously increased with the onset of industrialization and modernization, and of course the urbanization starting from 19th century onwards, right? And the just before we understand the concept of migration, let us try to understand what is migration, right? So the migration means generally that it's a movement of people, right? They change their residence from one place to another, so that results in migration. So generally, it is defined as any change is change of residence. The change of residence is migration. For instance, you have a lot of dictionaries and other very popular definitions that are there. So just will try to understand through those connotations and understanding. For instance, the International Science Encyclopedia on Population defines migration as geographic mobility that involves a change of usual residence between defined political or statistical areas or between residential areas of different types. And similarly, you have a demographic dictionary of United Nations that actually gives a different understanding towards the concept of migration. So it says that migration is such an event in which people move from one geographical area to another geographical area. When people actually move from their place of residence to live permanently or semi-permanently or temporary in another area, then it is called a migration, right? Therefore the movement of people from one residence to another is treated by demographers as a component of population growth, and and also the population changes, that leads to a change in population composition. So migration should be distinguished from migrants. There is a difference between the migration as well as the migrants, right? So consensus, and census and other reports, considered a person a migrant if his place of birth or place of the previous residence is different from the place where he is enumerated at the time. A migrant is thus one who changes his permanent residence for a long period of time and crosses political or administrative boundaries in the process, and is distinguished from someone who simply moves from one dwelling to another area and without crossing administrative or political frontiers. So, what I mean to indicate here is that the movement of people, the from one residence to another is called, the migration. And that actually gives rise to the changes in population growth as well as the population distribution, right? So so let us try to understand the types of migration. So what is the types? I know we have in the area of migration studies. Generally, you have different types of migration. It is commonly subdivided into internal and international migration, and the national migration, and so on. So suppose if a person travels within the state is called internal, and within the national is called national migration, or within the national countries is called international migration, right? So it's like, suppose if when an individual moves from one country to another, he is called as immigrant, right? By the native country. On the other hand, the same person can be an immigrant for the country if he migrates within the area of a destination. So immigrants are different and immigrants are different, right? So generally, you have a lot of perspectives, that actually talks on the types of migration. For instance, and you have intercontinental migration and international migration, and as well as the interstate migration. It means that the what is intercontinental migration? The migration where it means that the migration from one continent to another. For example, migration of an African, travels to migrates to American continent is called intercontinental migration. Suppose if the person travels on the international bound, between the international borders, those are called international migrants. For example, this type of migration results from the crossing of international borders. For example, if an Indian migrates to USA or other country, this is called international migration. So what is interstate migration? So you have another migration that is called interstate migration. So it means that the migration of people from one area state to another. For example, if a person travels from Telangana to Maharashtra, so is called it is the type of interstate migration. And you have another type of migration where it is called local migration. So this type of migration generally refers to the migration pattern from one area to another area within the same state. For example, if a person travels between the districts within the same states, is called local migration. So therefore, you have a different types of migration. On the one hand, you have a intercontinental migration, you have international migration, and you have interstate migration, as well as you have local migration. So these are all related to the spatial aspects of migration, because it is actually happens between the spaces, between the geographical boundaries. And and another thing is that, what are the causes for migration. So what are the causes that actually influence migration? it generally it can be divided into, generally speaking, it can be divided into push factors and pull factors, right? The push factors and pull factors are like, um, uh, for instance, push factors are like, are the factors and which lead to out migration. For example, the persons residing permanently at a place are forced to migrate to other areas due to occurrence of physical calamities like floods, famines, droughts, earthquakes, poverty, unemployment, communal conflicts, wars, pandemics, and etc., etc. So these are all the push, because these are the forced migration, because the migrant is not willing to migrate, but he's forced to migrate from that place due to natural calamities, due to wars, due to pandemic, and so on and so forth. But whereas you have another causes of migration, that is called pull factors. This is not a forced migration. It is like where he is willing to migrate from that place due to employment reasons, due to medical reasons, and a lot of other reasons, and those are called pull reasons because he is willing to migrate, right? Generally the pull factors are like, the responsible for in migration of people to a particular area from outside areas. The pull factors or the attracting forces are employment opportunities in industrialized areas, and availability of education, recreational medical facilities, and which operate as pull factors to attract migrants from other areas. So in other words, that this, as you see that most of the migration that occurs now in present day context is like the pull factors, because a lot of people are migrant. For example, if you can just cite an example of Indians only. So why Indians are migrating to other countries? Because he is willing to migrate. He's not forced to migrate, because he wants to migrate from this India to USA, for example, because there are two reasons. So the 2 to 3 reasons, for example. The first reason could be the employment, education opportunity, just because he wants to educate it in a very on the global platform from a reputed universities. And after getting education, so, and he's aim to get a good job in US. So, and also other lot of other facilities to lead a dignified luxury life. So all these factors are nothing but pull factors. Those are all pull factors, because those are not forced factors. Those are pull factors, and because the person is willing to migrate to another countries. So the causes of migration can be the push factors and pull factors. The push factors are the forced factors, where the person is forced to migrate from one area to another due to the war zones, due to natural calamities, due to the pandemic, and so on and so forth. Whereas the another cause is like, we have push pull factors, because these factors are responsible for in migration of people to a particular area from outside areas. So after studying this thing, so you have another analysis that um, uh, you know uh, the stability aspect. Suppose if we can observe that, is the stability of the migration is a permanent or temporary, and what. And it can be anything. It can be on a different for example, the migration can be said as a casual migration, and you have a temporary migration, you have a semi permanent migration, and also you have a permanent migration, right? For instance, what is casual migration? It involves a smaller or accidental movement of people. For example, in societies which follow patrilocal rule of residence like ours, where migration of female takes place after marriage from the area of residence of her parents to the area of the residence of her husband or in-laws. So this is a casual, because these casual migrations, it's like very normal in for instance in India. It's like after marriage, the wife moves to the place of the husband. This is called a casual means generally means that the casual migration are governed by the factors of the culture. The particularly here, the casual mind, the casual migration, the culture plays a crucial role, which allows people to migrate from their places to another, because since it is a culturally dominated process of migration, it is called casual migration. It is called casual migration. And you have another migration is called the temporary migration. You have a temporary migration. So generally in this type of migration, the migrants in this case visit areas of destination for a specific purpose and return back to the area of usual residence. For example, you have a business purpose, you have a pilgrimage, you have a temporary contracts and construction works, and tourism, so on and so forth. What is a temporary migration? For example, temporary migration is like where you go and work. For example, you have a lot of just imagine that look at the areas of pilgrimage. For example, you have a Tirupati, right? In Tirupati, and we see generally on the TV that this many thousands of people visited today, right? And those people are actually going there and staying there for temporary, and then again coming back to their original place, right? They're going there to fulfill their desire to visit the temple and seek the blessings of the god. All right, that is a temporary migration. And after and this is one type. And you have another tourism. For example, there are a lot of people migrate to Kashmir, for example. They stay there for some time and again coming back. And there are a lot of other migrant workers. For example, those are all the construction laborers. And generally, and we find the lot of laborers, they come from rural areas to urban areas in search of the employment. So what they do generally, they generally come to the urban areas, they stay there for some time, they construct the building, and after completion of the building, and again they go back to their native places. So this is the temporary migration. The temporary migration is generally has a specific purpose, and generally they generally move from one place to another to fulfill that purpose, and again coming back to their original place. So that's called temporary migration. And you have another type of migration, it is called semi permanent migration. So in this type of migration, generally the migrants move to other areas to earn the means of livelihood, but maintain continuous contact with their native place and home where some members of their families reside. These migrants visit their native place at regular intervals of time. For example, and you have a lot of the Indians and who reside in the Middle East. For example, Dubai and Muscat, and you have Kuwait, and you have other places, and in fact, of course, USA and other countries. What they do generally, they go there. They don't take their families. They go there, they work, and for some time, and again they coming back to their native place, and they stay here for at least 1 month or 2 months, on holiday trip. Again, they move back to their the workplace to continue their work. So that's called semi-permanent, because neither he is permanent here nor there. He has two houses here. The one house is the belongs to the their native place, where he meets his families and spends some time in their native place. And after spending some time with their families, again he moves back to his the workplace, and to continue his work. So this is called the semi-permanent migration. And you have the fourth aspect of the migration, that is called the permanent migration. And this is called this is where that actually gives rise to a major change in the population distribution, because this is a permanent migration. It means that this type of migration has considerable effect on both the areas of the origin, as well as areas of destination. So under this type, migrants settle permanently in the area and contribute to the development of the area. So they participate in all the activities taking place in that area. So this permanent migration aspect actually causes a lot of changes in the population distribution, because they go and stay there. They don't come back, because they become the permanent residents of that place. Generally it causes the growth of the population in that area. and they generate a lot of their children, and the population growth, and not only that, they also influence their presence in terms of the contribution to the economic growth and the political and the cultural patterns, so on and so forth. So this is where you have a different types of the migration, as we discussed. The first thing is the casual migration. So in the casual migration, where it involves a smaller or accidental movement of people, which actually predominantly causes with the influence of cultural patterns, for example. And you have in patrilocal rule of residence, the migration of female takes place after marriage, from the area of the residence of her parents to the area of the residence of her husband. So that's called the casual migration. Because we are using the word casual, because this casual is actually governed by societal rules, cultural norms, and cultural practices and beliefs, and so on and so forth. And you have another types, as we discussed, and you have a temporary migration, where in this type of migration, the migrants in this case visit areas of destination for a specific purpose and return back to the area of usual residence. For example, business purpose, visiting the temple, and spending some time on tourist destinations, so on and so forth. And you have another type of the migration is called semi-permanent migration. This is not a permanent migration, but is a semi-permanent, where in this type of migration, the migrants move uh, where here in this semi-permanent migration, and where the migrants move to other areas to earn the means of livelihood, but maintain continuous contact with their native place and home, where some members of the families reside. So this is where it is called semi-permanent, because neither he is a permanent resident here nor at the workplace, because that's where it is called semi-permanent migration. And you have another aspect of migration. It is called permanent migration. This type of migration has considerable effects on both the areas of origin as well as areas of destination. So under this type, migrants settle permanently in the area and contribute to the development of the area in terms of the culture, in terms of the politics, in terms of the economy, and so on and so forth. So after discussing all these things, let us try to understand. There are other types of migration also. Along with all this, we have another types of migration. Well, let us try to understand, just to eliminate your mindsets, to elaborate on the much more detailed on the concept of migration. So you have another types are called like you have immigration as well as immigration. So what is immigration and what is immigration? So let us try to understand this concept. The concept of immigration refers to the migration of individuals from the mother country to another country. That is called immigrant, because suppose if a person leaves from Hyderabad to USA, right, America, so he's emigrating, right? So because he's emigrating, he's leaving his mother country and going to another country, right? So that's called immigrant. So therefore, this process is migration is called immigration, and the person is called immigrant, because he is not only a migrant but is also an immigrant, because he is leaving his mother country and going to another country to settle, and to seek the educational benefits, employment benefits, and or to settle in that country. So this is one type of concept of immigration. And you have, on the other hand, you have immigration, which takes place when individuals migrate from one country to another, right? So this type of migration is considered from the point of view of the country to which the individual has migrated. Hence, an immigrant is a migrant considered in terms of the destination. Taking some example of the Indian migration to USA becomes immigrant for USA and immigrant for India. So this is the basic difference between immigration and immigration, right? And you have another migration called, the aspect of the migration called, generally it says that, the chain migration. So what is the chain migration? That in this type, each migration includes another to migrate. For example, when migrants come to urban areas from rural areas and are settled in jobs, they set up their families and invite other relatives to follow suit. Under international migration, for instance, the chain migration can be very much seen in the case of immigrants from India to developed countries like USA, UK, and Canada, where the relatives of migrants are induced to follow suit. It means that the chain migration is that it's a very simple thing is that suppose if one person travels to USA, generally what happens after the person travels to USA, so he invites his relatives and other friends to follow him, because he sets an example there that how to pass the visa interview and how to go and settle there. So he invites other people to be with him, or I mean to if, go for education purpose and to earn some livelihood there. So he becomes an example there. So this type of chain migration also happens. Generally it happens with the case of Indians. For example, when look at the Telugu societies, particularly Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and there's a lot of people, they migrate. The first, the one person migrates, and after migrating, that he invites his friends there, and he invites his family members and relatives to come and settle there. So this type of migration is called chain migration, because they are in the form of a chain, right? They are in the form of a chain. So since they are in the form of a chain, so because the connectivity continues in during the process of migration, so that is called chain migration. The chain migration actually forces people and encourages people and influences people to migrate from one area to another, through the means of the kinship, through the means of friendship, through the means of the bonds they, the emotional bonds they have, and the sense of security they have. The people migrate from one area to another. So this is called chain migration. This is called chain migration. And you have another type of migration is called, the individual and collective migration. Generally, under collective migration, the group of individuals or families move from one area to another. For example, in tribal societies, migration of a tribe or a clan takes place. Right? Those, for example, those practices. Some generally tribal societies have different practices of cultivation, where they move from one area to another, after completing that, the cultivation, on a seasonal pattern. So generally they don't move alone. They move together. All the clan of the tribe, they move from one geographical area to another geographical area, in search of the agriculture, in search of the food, and in search of the sense of security, in search of the sustenance to derive from the forest and natural surroundings. They move from one area to another. So that is called collective, because they don't move in a group. I mean, they don't move in a alone. They move in a group. That is called a collective migration. That is called a collective migration. As we discussed, and where we also discussed the lot of other factors that influences voluntary and forced migration, as we discussed in the aspects of the push factors as well as the pull factors, where the both the voluntary and forced migration causes the population distribution and changes in composition of population distribution, so on and so forth. And as you see that when it comes to the Indian thing, and generally I mean, in what causes the changes in the population distribution in India. For example, why particular state has more population, why particular state has low population, and why particular rural area has more population, and why particular urban area has less population or more population. So what changes this? What changes these population patterns in Indian context particularly? Let us try to understand those concepts now. For example, the internal migration. For example, in India, the lot of people migrate from one area to another. That's called internal migration within the India. So what are the major types? What are the major patterns that one can understand, on the nature of this migration process? For instance, you have urban to urban migration. All right. So urban to urban migration. So in this type of migration, individuals migrate from one urban area to another. In this type of migration, individuals migrate from one urban area to another, right? So this the reasons are the same as that of rural to rural migration. Generally, if from urban to urban migration, generally it happens within the cities. And I'll give you an example of within the city, that where people migrate from one area to one colony to another. For example, either it could be the education purpose, or it could be the employment purpose, or it could be a natural purpose. The people migrate within the urban setups from one area to another. Even in the cities such as Hyderabad, you don't have a same composition of population within the Hyderabad. And for example, you may have very huge population in the areas called Koti, and you may have very little I mean, the less population on the outskirts of the Hyderabad. I mean, why it is happening? Because the more people they concentrate in particular area, just because of three to four reasons. The one thing is that maybe that area is dominated, or predominantly they have the presence of education, and employment opportunities are more, and you have a lot of the business opportunity, and also the lot of other available needs and goods. The people generally reside in those areas where they meet their desires, they meet their the needs in terms of education, employment, and so on and so forth. So generally, in the urban to urban migration, in this type of migration, individuals migrate from one urban area to another, in search of livelihood, in search of education purpose, in search of the security, and in search of the luxury they define. So and you have another type of migration, where generally it talks about the urban to rural migration. So now we discussed about urban to urban migration. Now the second aspect is called urban to rural migration. So this type of migration takes place from urban areas to rural areas. Such a type of migration takes place occasionally. This type of migration is also termed as reverse flow, as it contracts the common tendency to migrate from rural to urban. So this type of migration stream is seen as a corresponding counter to stream flowing in the opposite direction. Generally, you can see that the urban to rural migration. So why generally it happens? Because there are two reasons. The one thing is that they go back to their villages and settle there, after completing their work in the urban areas and spending some time. Then they go back uh, to, it's like garvapasi, right? They go and reside in their native place, and because of a lot of reasons. Either it could be to maintain their cultural contact with their native place, and to enjoy the benefits of the nature, the greenery, in the rural place, and to escape from the all sort of pollution from the urban areas. Generally people go and reside in the rural areas, so they enjoy the beauty nature, and they spend time with the families, and so on and so forth. So that's called the rural to urban to rural migration. And you have another type of migration, so that's called rural to a rural migration. So in this type of migration, when migrants move from rural area to another, and generally among the all migrations, right? This is the in India, which migration pattern is so dominant is the rural to rural population, because among the rural societies, people migrate in crores, in crores of population. They generally migrate from rural area to rural areas, right? It's not that they migrate from rural to urban areas. It's not that. The most of the people, they migrate from rural to rural migration. So this is the predominant factor of the migration process in Indian context, right? The rural to rural migration in Indian context plays a predominant role, occupies a dominant space in the aspects of migration process in India. So in the rural to rural migration, this migration takes place when migrants move from one rural area to another. The reasons for such movement are varied. And varied, and it has a lot of other reasons, various reasons why people migrate from rural area to another rural area. Generally, the reasons are migration of females after marriage, as we discussed. Generally, after marriage, it is because of the cultural, patterns. Generally, the female migrates to the husband house, where husband resides. So this is from a rural to rural. So this migration results in a horizontal social mobility, as the individuals do not have the chance to move upward in occupational or economic sectors. Generally, it happens. They reside from one area to another. They just change the geographical position, but generally it doesn't bring a lot of change in their economic and social mobility, because only when a person moves from rural to urban areas, there are more chances to change in their economic and social status. But whereas when it comes to the migration pattern from rural area to rural area, generally, in this type of migration, their economic position may not play a significant change, right? Bring a significant change in their life. This is a type of migration where in Indian context it plays a huge role. So that is rural to rural migration. And you have another type of migration that is called the rural to urban migration. So it is the most frequent type of migration, because as we see that why urban spaces are increasing day by day. For example, a lot of people are migrating from rural area to urban area, particularly in areas called Hyderabad city. The population is growing day by day. As a result, what the government of Telangana, as well as the government of you at the central level also, so what they're trying to bring in, they're trying to bring in a lot of infrastructural developments in terms of road winding and construction of roads, and bringing water to the city, and constructing new buildings, and the flyovers and so on and so forth. And as a result, the geographical limits of the Hyderabad zone is being now enlarged. Now they are saying that the lot of municipalities are now got increased, and saying that the area, geographical space is also getting increased, just to increase the space of the urban space, because the lot of the crores of people are migrating to the urban areas in search of economic opportunities, in search of educational opportunities for their children, and in search of medical tourism, in search of the, of course, tourism in terms of the pilgrimage, and so on and so forth. So now the point is that why people are migrating from rural to urban areas. And particularly one of the prime reason is that there is a tremendous effect of the globalization on the rural economy, because the rural economy has got adversely affected, and where people are unable to find a suitable income and suitable jobs in the rural villages. The rural economy has got affected and declined and adversed. As a result, people do not have any other options just to migrate from their rural areas to urban areas in search of livelihood, in search of the educational opportunity, and also to meet their medical needs. Though a lot of people are migrating, so day by day the migration process towards the urban areas are now increasing, right? So this, in this type, from the rural to urban migration, it is the most frequent type of migration, that actually taking place in India. As a result, various push factors are operating from the rural side, and pull factors are actually operating from the urban side simultaneously. So the push factors, which, as I told you, that actually forced individuals to migrate from rural area to urban areas, and whereas the pull factors are like, the economic and educational opportunities that actually, these urban areas have those presence. As a result, people are actually getting attracted towards those opportunities, and therefore people are migrating from rural area to urban areas. So this is like a general pictures of the aspects of the migration. As I told you that, what causes, the migration. I think you must have now understood that, there are several causes responsible for migration in general, and particularly rural to urban migration in particular. So now let us try to understand, what are the major factors and what are the major causes that actually cause for the migration process in Indian context. The one of the primary cause is that, the physical cause, and you have a physical cause, and you have a economic cause, and you have a socio-cultural factors, and you have a political causes. So generally, now we'll try to understand, as I told you, that there are four types of causes. The first cause is the physical cause, and in the physical cause, and you have the climatic conditions, right? For example, the floods, drought, famines, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and so on and so forth, that actually leads to migration. So physical causes generally come from the nature, generally come from the climate, because this play a huge role in the for the physical cause to for the migration. And this physical cause of the migration is not new to any society. For example, it is being occurring since ages. For example, climate played a major role in the early human migration. For example, and you have a very if you have the dry climate conditions of Central Asia led to migrations to China, India, and other European countries. This process actually happened, at least 2,000 years ago. It's like, due to those dry climatic conditions of Central Asia, a lot of people migrated to other countries such as China and India in search of the livelihood, in search of the betterment of security, and to improve their security. And you have, for example, in Himalayan regions also, the migration takes place due to the severe cold climate, isn't it? And you can't stay there where, due to, if there is a huge cold climate, and you're forced to migrate, isn't it? You're forced to migrate from that place, because you have to live in this place where you find a sense of security to lead a normal life and or luxury life. Generally people migrate. These are all the physical causes of the migration. And also, you have, suppose if you have a lot of drought, for example, within the Telangana context, and the lot of people migrate from Mahbubnagar district to Hyderabad and other areas, because in Mahbubnagar generally it is characterized by severe drought prone area, and people migrate from those areas to another areas in search of livelihood and betterment of security. So therefore, the physical causes plays a huge role in the cause of the migration. And you have another type of migration. Another cause of migration is called the economic cause. As I told you, that there is a very close relationship between the economic factors and migration. That most of the migrations have been due to search for means of livelihood, and people move to more productive areas from areas where there is insufficient or non-availability of means of livelihood. So I think this is one of the prime factors, why people migrate, from one area to another area. So, and after that, and you have another area called, the uh, another cause is the socio-cultural causes. The socio-cultural factors also influence the extent of migration, where individuals move from one area to another area for socio-economic reasons. And the particularly the culture plays a huge role here. One of the best example is the marriage. So during the marriage, after the marriage, the wife moves to the place of the husband. So this is why she migrates from her native place to the place of the husband, is because of the marriage. Not only the marriage, but also it is because of the socio and economic factors. So this is the generally one can see in the type of the marriage. And you have another the cause of the marriage is called the political cause. And in this migrate in this type of the cause is the migration is affected by the political upheavals in the country. For example, wars, and in the time of war and at the time of political decisions, people are forced to migrate to another part of the in another areas of the country, or another different parts of the country, or to a different country together, that in search of their security and to lead a dignified life. And generally people migrate. This is the main cause of the political cause. So this is the, like, what happens when people migrate. So this is the cause of the migration. But what happens when people migrate? So what brings with the migration, right? The impact of the migration is not only affects the population composition in their native area, but also to the place where they are actually going and residing in that area also. It brings tremendous changes in their population, distribution and population growth, right? So the one of the consequences is the population change, and another consequence is the changes in the economy. For example, if the population is, so if for example, if entire rural population migrates to the urban areas, generally what happens is that it brings fruits to only few, but it gives the bitter results to many. In other words, the urban space is very limited, where it cannot provide an opportunity to all people who migrates from their rural areas to urban areas. So since, as a result, what happens is that the lot of urban people adds to the list of the population growth. So as a result, there is an unequal distribution of resources, and there's an unequal socioeconomic status also getting increased. Only with the result of this by migration, only few gets the betterment positions, but whereas the vast majority of the migrants, they find very hardships to sustain their livelihood in the areas of urban cities. So this thus the migration is a very complex process which affects not only the size and growth of the population, but also it brings remarkable changes and alterations in the population distribution, and also in the and also it also brings on the economic burden of the society, and also it affects the population and political structure and decision, and so on and so forth. So so friends, and in this class we discussed about the migration and the aspects of migration in detail. Thus, the migration is a process of changing residence to the area they go and reside. So it brings a lot of changes in the population structure. It brings a lot of change in the population distribution. Not only the population distribution, it also brings heavy change on the economic policies, political policies, and so on and so forth. So therefore, the migration plays a very huge aspect in studying the rural and urban sociology discourse. Thank you for attending this class. Uh, do you have any questions, friends? Harinath and Manasa are there on the screen. Do you have any questions? Hello? Hello?
No,
Yeah,
sir.
I think, yeah. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for attending class today. And again, we'll meet in the next class. Thank you. Thank you. I'll take leave now.